Greetings and salutations, this is Imperator Vespasian and his trusty sidekick.
Hello.
And what we're bringing you today is some Persian Immortals. But not Immortals as they were, these guys are based on the film 300. Because it's an awesome film and
everyone knows them.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be fun to do. So I'll just zoom in on these guys. That's the guys. I had quite a few headscarves left over from the Arab conquest infantry, and I decided to use them to put onto Greeks in laminar armour and make them look like immortals. I just thought that might be quite fun. In reality, the immortals covered their faces. So the immortal figures that we've already got, in actual fact, they wore a black face cover, a Muslim face cover, which they could see through, but you couldn't see their face. So they had no face. And they fought entirely in silence, which must have been terrifying for the Greeks, or for anybody really. But I've had a little bit of fun with these. I've cut the faces off of some zombies and put them on the front of a few of these to give them a sort of scary face mask. That wasn't actually as uncommon as you might think. Roman cavalry did the same. They used to wear a silver face mask that was polished so much that you could see your reflection in it.
So did the King of Jerusalem.
Yes, he wore a face mask, but then again that's because his face fell off. So, you know, because he didn't have a face.
But still.
Yeah, still. I just thought that would be quite a fun project to do, and given that we're doing Greeks, I just thought I'd have some fun with it. So they're the Persian Immortals. So what do you think?
Look pretty good.
They're the guys. I think they're quite cool.
Yeah.
As with normal Immortals, each Immortal carries theoretically a shield. Not all of them have shields. Shield, a arista, which is aristi, asti, is it? Is that right? Which is the name of the spear that they carry. They carry a spear which is about 2 foot shorter than a Greek spear, and it has an apple on the end, or a banana, or a bunch of grapes. Some sort of vegetable, usually. So it was actually a mace. So on one hand you had the mace, and on the other hand you had the spear tip. We've already done this in another video, so I'll not go into detail with that.
Yeah.
But the problem was, it was about 2 foot shorter than the dory. So the Greeks had far better range when it came to combat. And the Persian Immortals were terrifying. They all dressed the same, so they wore an actual proper uniform, and they had their faces covered, and they made no sound. So they fought in complete silence. And that would have been scary. They would have looked like sort of scary ghost people.
Inhuman.
Yes, inhuman. And they would go up and they generally, you wouldn't use them first. You would soften the enemy up first before you use them. So your enemy would be exhausted by the time they came to fight the Immortals, and then the Immortals would come and finish them off. Didn't work for the Greeks. What?
They want to make sure it's in focus.
Their back rank isn't in focus, but you get the general idea. So they're armed with the aristi. They also carry the copis, which is the axe type blade, but they also carried the sagris, which was an axe. In the film 300 they used the copis blade, whereas a lot of them would have had the axe rather than the copis, but some did use copis. They all carried a bow, and they caused terror to the enemy. That's a good rule. And they're also immortal. Good point. The reason they're called Immortals, you already know this, is they had lots of reserves. So every time a soldier died, an Immortal died, he was replaced by another soldier. So they appeared to be immortal because no matter how many of them you killed, they kept coming. The more men kept coming. So they had a huge reserve of troops. They had 40,000 immortals standing in the Persian army. I don't know how many troops would have been in reserve.
They probably have hundreds of them.
They would have had at least. So they would have been able to replace their losses, but they would have lost their reserve. So, on to you. Questions?
We haven't got into the background yet.
I just have done. We've already done an immortal video on the normal Persian Immortals, so
Yeah.
I don't want to go over old ground again. But these are sort of based on the film 300.
So, let's say they're elite, yeah?
Yeah.
So let's say a bowman, would they be extremely good?
Yes.
Dangerously
Yes,
accurate?
because they hunted. The Immortals were used to hunt and scavenge for the army. The Immortals would be the only Persian troops allowed to wander off on their own, for a start. And as the army marched, the Immortals would just wander off and they would go and shoot animals for food and hunt animals for food. They would fight tigers with their swords rather than their spears and kill them, and they would, that's what the Immortals did. They were very, very loyal to the Persian Empire, and they were the only troops really trusted to operate on their own. So an Immortal would think nothing of it as the army was marching, just leaving the army and going in search of game to hunt.
Like a knight.
Yes. But knights are, knights are independent officers, really, aren't they? But that's
They do everything on their own. They can do
Yes.
things on their own. They'll never betray their oath.
yeah, they were capable of operating independently from the army. You could send 2 knights off to go and do something, and they would take their retinue with them and go and do it, and you knew they'd do it. This is much the same with these guys. These guys definitely would do the same.
So would you say this is like the first most loyal army in the world?
For the time, the Egyptians had an elite guard. About 1,000 years before this. I would assume they would have been very loyal, very good soldiers, much the same as the Immortals. They didn't have the reputation of the Immortals. The Persian Empire had one hell of a reputation for war. And the Immortals were always where the army was fighting. You would always bring the Immortals with you because they were your elite guard. They were your guard. In fact, the term guard would probably be the best way to describe them. We think of the French Guard or the British Guard in the Napoleonic Wars. These are the guard. These are the elite unit that is the core of your army. And if your Immortals get beat, the rest of the army runs away, which is just like real life. That's what happens. So, as with the bow, most bowmen were rubbish. Most bows were rubbish. They didn't really do... They are depictions, although they are comments on bows. Generally, the bows didn't really do much damage because it's not like in a film where you're firing at someone at close range. Yes, if you've got a bow at close range, you can shoot someone and do some damage. An arrow can go through armour if you hit it with enough. If you hit it at the right angle and you use the right arrowhead. Persian arrowheads were not designed to go through armour. They were designed for penetration, to stick in and be very hard to take out. They were very difficult to remove. So the Persian arrowheads the Persians usually used would probably be not much use against armoured Greeks. But what you're really doing with your Persian army is you're getting thousands and thousands of bowmen all firing at maximum range. So you're all firing high into the air at maximum range, and you're doing it en masse. You're not having individual bowmen shooting at the enemy. So if you've got someone as well trained as an Immortal who actually uses the bow to hunt with, if he's in close range, he could definitely loose an arrow into a Greek, and he would definitely hit. And if he hit a place that was unarmoured, such as the thigh or aimed for the eye slits, or the helmet or the neck, you could definitely... an immortal could do that, no problem. But it's unlikely he's actually drawing a bow at that point.
He's probably got his axe out.
Yes. In fact, what the immortals may be good at is that they use the same tactics. They were just as well at fighting in ranks as they were fighting individually, because they were very good at fighting on their own. That meant that when they went up against the Greeks, who some of the Greeks used to like fighting independently, so the Greeks would fight in their big shield wall, the phalanx. But they wouldn't use the phalanx throughout the entire battle. They would use the phalanx for the initial combat bit, and then they would break from the phalanx and just go out into single combat and then reform into the phalanx. And the Spartans themselves, they used to feint, which is that they used to pretend to panic and run away. And that would cause the enemy to chase them. And then they would reform, and the enemy would be unformed, and they would be able to slaughter the enemy. That happened to the Medes. But the Immortals probably aren't going to fall for that. The Immortals are probably good enough at taking on an enemy in close combat. They also wore armour under their robes. You can see the armour here because I've used armoured soldiers to make the figures. But in reality, that some of them would have armour underneath.
Let's say now you've got one Immortal.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best Immortals.
Yeah.
And you've got one Spartan. And put them in a room to fight. Who would win?
Spartan.
Who win then?
The Spartan is brought up, on average, the Spartan. The Immortal is probably the only Persian soldier capable of defeating a Spartan. With skill. But the Spartan has been brought up from the age of... seven?
Five. I thought he got taken away from his parents at 5.
I thought it was 7.
I can't remember.
Oh, it might
Maybe
be 5
it's
or
7.
7. It might be 7. And he's trained in combat from that age. Immortals, not really the same training program. Immortals were definitely trained. They were definitely... But they weren't brought up from birth to be an immortal. Although many immortals, it would be a family thing. So if your father was an immortal, you would be brought up to be an immortal. So you're probably going to get some decent training from your father. And then when you go, they didn't really have an academy, but they had immortal. The immortals had their own facilities, their own barracks, and I would assume they would definitely be trained. An immortal against an average Greek, I would give the immortal the points for that. I'd say against a normal Greek, the immortal would probably win without much effort. But against a trained Greek, no, you're in trouble. The Greek's got better equipment than you. He's probably got better training than you.
Yeah.
And also, you're fighting under orders. An immortal is fighting for the empire. They're fighting to defend their empire.
A Greek's fighting to defend his home.
Yes.
Much more dedicated to it.
Yeah. If you die, if you fail, bad things will happen to your wife and kids, and your house will burn. You will lose everything.
Your friends will die.
Yeah. If you're an immortal and you die, well, yeah, it's bad because you've just made the emperor look stupid. You've shamed the emperor. No, you've shamed yourself to the emperor. And you've upset the empire. The empire's going to be upset. But you're not really losing anything yourself other than your own life. So you are willing to fight and die, yes, but you don't have the sheer dedication that someone who's defending his house has.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would always give people defending their homeland home field advantage, because this is their home. You came to their home, and he or she hates you. That you've attacked them. So I would say possibly the reason the Greeks did lose in the Ionian War was because they weren't fighting for their home, whereas the Persian troops were. So they had home field advantage in that case. And probably also why the Greeks weren't able to really take on the Persian Empire militarily in Persia. Morale, I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Any questions?
That's it.
Is that it? That was a short video, really, wasn't it? For the Immortals. But then again, I'm not covering the whole history of the Immortals because we've already done that.
Yeah.
We've done 2 Immortal videos already. So I don't really want to keep repeating myself. So that's it. I told you the rules for it, so that's them.
If you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe and comment down below what you think of the Immortals. That's everything from me.
And everything from him. Goodbye.
See ya.